So the conversation that's going to be happening is taking place between myself and my colleague. We are both white females, and we have both been teaching. We are both fifth grade teachers at the school that I currently teach at. It's my first year at the school, my 6th year teaching, and it is her 12th year teaching and her 8th year at the school. We teach a rotation model in order to get our fifth graders ready for middle school, and I teach the social studies rotation. She teaches the design thinking rotation, and then our third colleague teaches the grammar and spelling rotation. So towards the spring semester, it was chapter 12 in our history book. We were coming up, and this chapter was on slavery, and she had come in one afternoon and had brought up the conversation with me about how I was going to be teaching the slavery chapter, and I told her I hadn't thought about it yet, but when I got there, if I had any questions, I would let her know. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. Her and I had a little bit of a relationship as the year had progressed on, of what I felt as and what I took as passive aggressive behavior in some other instances of things that had happened. So for example, back to school night, I had a parent come in, my room parent, and help me set up things on back to school night, and my partner teacher came in and gave me a really hard time about it, saying that's not how we do things here. Teachers do everything on their own. And it wasn't very friendly. And then I had another instance with her where I was planning on getting something done, but it wasn't in her time frame. And so she took a hold of it and just completed it on her own and got our third teacher involved. Anyways, we just had a couple instances where it wasn't so great. So she had told me that she didn't think that I should teach the chapter on slavery because she didn't think the maturity of our students were there, and she didn't think I was prepared to teach it in a way that when students went home to their families that they would have a positive reception to learning about that. She thought they weren't ready. And she didn't think that I should teach it. And at the time, I really didn't know what to do. It was my first year teaching. And so I just I let her shut me down and I didn't teach it. And she had also mentioned that she was going to be teaching in her design project at the end of the year, they were going to be doing a civil rights leader project. And she thought through that they would cover the basis on what the slavery chapter was about. And so like I said, at the time I shut down and I didn't say anything, and I didn't teach slavery chapter that year. And I didn't teach the next year either. So I only taught fifth grade for 2 years, but I didn't teach it for either. I let her take that on. And I think it was, I didn't know how to react at the time. And so this conversation that you're going to be seeing is a conversation that I wish I would have had the next day or the following day or right then and there. But this conversation would have taken place the next day. So I'm going to be Chelsea, and my colleague David is going to be Greta. So here we go. You ready?
Yep.
Hey Greta, is this a good time to run something by you?
Hi Chelsea, come on in. I have a few minutes before I leave.
Great. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday regarding the upcoming chapter on slavery, and I would like to revisit that conversation with you.
Okay.
I thought about what you said, and I've decided I'm going to teach the chapter on slavery.
I think you should be cautious around this. I can take on this load for you with covering the content in my civil rights project. I have taught this school for 8 years, and I know the community and the maturity of our fifth graders.
I understand, and I do appreciate your efforts in showing me how things are done at this school. Your mentorship has been very helpful. There was a time when you were new to this school as well, and while you were new to navigating everything also. I imagine there were choices that you had to make regarding your classroom and teaching practices that felt right for you.
Yes, I'm sure there were, but like you, I also worked with a veteran teacher when I started here. When I spoke to you yesterday, I was trying to help save you time with your social studies curriculum this year, knowing I would be covering the civil rights movement.
I appreciate that. However, I think we have a responsibility to teach our students about the history of slavery and the hardships that were endured during that time. The end of slavery was a catalyst to the Jim Crow laws and segregation, and ultimately the civil rights movement, in which the leaders our students will study came to be prominent. The design project that you described to me yesterday, I believe will have a deeper meaning for our students, if they come into it with a more thorough historical background. As I read in an article, the authors advocated the students need to see segregation prejudice as enduring social problems, not just historical moments that came and went.
Do you not think I will make sure students read a lot of this in their research?
I do. And my purpose in wanting to teach the chapter isn't about what the students will or won't do under your guidance. I actually think your project will provide our students an opportunity to reflect on the things that they have learned in the chapter with me and give them the creativity of the video they will produce that will allow them a way to express how the topic has shaped their thoughts and ideas.
I understand and hear what you're saying. I support your decision in moving forward with teaching this chapter.
Thank you for your support. I think at the end of the day, we have to look at teaching with our students at the forefront of our minds in the decisions that we make. I can't not teach this material out of concern to the students' maturity levels or out of fear of what students might go home and say to their families.
Let me know if there's anything I can do to support you as you move through this chapter. Want to touch base real quick about the reading lesson for tomorrow?
Good idea.
See.
Thank you. Good job. You were great, Greta.
Okay. Are we just opening it up for feedback?
Yeah, so one more feedback. So I think that it was really good that instead of like shutting down her teaching of like the civil rights subject, that you built on it to indicate like the reasons for teaching the slavery unit in addition to the civil rights movement.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree with that. That it wasn't shut down again, so definitely needed to be taught. And I think you did have good examples of why it needed to be taught.
Yeah, I thought the same, and lots of initial affirmations and connections on the front end. You know, like, oh, you know, I'm sure you remember when you were a first year teacher too, and you know, just putting her in that mood of and that understanding of, you know, where you are as a way of connecting to her in terms of her remembering where she was. So that would be my warm response. A little bit, it's not cool, I don't like this idea of cool, but the idea of thinking about additional ways to extend the conversation, because there was a way where, having listened to you describe this to me before last week, as well as this, her transition was so smooth. It's like, oh, okay, I just didn't know this.
so
You you really needed to teach this, you know, slavery camp. So go ahead, I'm going to support it. I think that that might pressing her a little, a slightly more complicated positioning on her part in terms of, you know, probing her resistance to it. In terms of, you know, having an opportunity, using this as an opportunity to get at what is the resistance. If it's only that I'm just trying to make it easy for you, then that would be, you know, acceptable. But it seems like there's something underneath that the hard conversation really wants to get out, because you've talked to me about how this is also that school district's way.
Right.
And so we didn't get into this other layer of how this is a way that we do things here, and we don't really want to. So it's like a little more than you just not being essentially, which was really problematic, competent enough to teach the slavery piece. I'm going on a little too long, but the other thing that I wanted to make sure we that I felt is that there's no reason why the slavery and the civil rights unit shouldn't be connected and seen as a sort of continuity between each other. So I thought it could be interesting to suggest, you know, in getting her to get on board with the slavery unit, working together to make sure that the kinds of things that needed to be connected. You did that in your oral. You know, it went through slavery, it went through Jim Crow, it moved to civil rights. But maybe getting her on board to see that a better way to even teach the civil rights unit is to draw out the strands of how things that are happening in the civil rights movement are connected to things that were going on in the history of slavery, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I've talked too much.
Okay. No, you didn't. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have some questions down. I don't know if this is a time for response for questions, or let's see. How would you bring the students into the conversation?
I wouldn't.
Like, no,
You
not
mean,
into
like,
your
actual
conversation,
students?
but like when you were describing to her, you know, why the important ways of teaching it would be, and you talked about, you know, making sure your students were okay and checking in with them. How would you incorporate them into the lesson of, how would you incorporate the students into the lesson?
You mean, how would I teach the lesson?
I guess since she was saying that they were immature
Mm-hmm.
and they're, because of their age level, like would there be a way to respond, like how could you have responded to her in that way about like what they could have done during the lesson to show their maturity, or like how can they have prepared a little bit more or something like that? Like would you bring that example in with her?
I don't think so, to be honest. I don't
Yeah.
think I need to go back to the student's maturity level. Because I think, like Tori said, like at the end of the day, I don't think it was about that. I just don't think she wanted me doing it. And now and I'm even saying this out loud, I guess I would have thought about my conversation differently, because thinking about the tendencies of passive aggressive behavior we'd had over the year, it could also be about the fact she didn't want me doing anything that would look better than her. So like if I ended up doing a good job with it, and then that would make me look good and me in a light. So I don't think it was about the maturity of the students, if I'm being completely honest. I think it was about her not wanting me to do it in the first place and finding this way about it. But if that was the case, I mean, I think the grade level curriculum was fine for the maturity of my students. I don't think that they were immature. I do think you have to be cautious and aware about when you present topics and subjects to students that they're not familiar with, or that they don't have experience with, or that their background isn't tied into, right? So I don't even remember how much, I mean, they've learned about slavery and the history of the United States over time as they've grown up, right? But in 5th grade, it's really time you start learning about like, this is really where it happened. These are the things that happened. This is where America came from. And so I think with that, you just kind of have to play it by ear. I think I would design my lesson as is for the whole chapter, and this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I want to teach it. Play it by ear to see how the students are acting and how they're reacting, and kind of take it like that and see how it goes from there, which kind of sounds like more of a reactive approach. If that answers your question.
And it's kind of like, did she have a more subjective definition of the student's level of maturity? It was more her perception of their levels?
I think it was her perception. I think she just thinks that the 5th graders weren't ready to have a conversation about slavery at all. So, and like the kind of conversation with Jabari, the school that I work at is a very close, tight-knit community school. It's really small. It's really high SES. It's majority white students. And so I think just bringing the topic about race into the classroom at all was something that was kind of like, ooh, we don't really do that here. So like they'll learn that another year, they'll learn that when they get into middle school, kind of a thing. And so that was really the issue of her just not wanting me to do it. And I don't know, maybe there was the protection clause in there where she's like, really, I just want to kind of protect you from everything that could happen and backlash of this. Or really, I was like, I just don't think it, like, we just don't do that here. It's not the
Do you feel
Woodside
like
way.
she was protecting herself at the same time too?
I feel like she was protecting herself the whole year, always. And so I do feel like this was another place in it. And maybe because she saw herself as like the leader of our little group because she had been there longer than anyone else. But that at the end of the day, that shouldn't matter, right? But it did at the time, and so I took it and I went with it. Which I wish I wouldn't have done, obviously, looking back in hindsight. She's no longer there, and those were her own choices to leave. But the longer I was there, the more I learned that her manipulation and control over like what teachers did and didn't do didn't stop at me. So there was, now I'm even thinking there's even another hard conversation I can have, right? Like about manipulation, and you don't get to make my decisions for me. Like I got hired here, you were actually on my interview panel, you chose me for this position, so you can't come in now and, you know what I mean, like tell me what I can and can't do, for the most part. So.
One nice quick question is, had the slavery unit ever been taught? She's been there for, say, 10 years. Has it ever been taught in her tenure? Did you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, I never asked.
Okay.
And after we had gotten this assignment, learned about the assignment a couple weeks ago, I thought about going back and finding out. And then even then I'm like, I'm not gonna bring this back up again. But it's something I could find out because my current middle school science teacher used to teach 5th grade before I came in. I took her position.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that I could find out and I could learn. I don't know the answer to that.
Do we ask that? the first question.
Oh, yeah, I did have a question on here of, how did you feel when she said that you didn't need to teach the unit?
I don't remember. I think at the time, I think I was just confused, and I couldn't figure out why I would skip over that. And when she immediately came in and said, I'm going to be teaching the civil rights movement, I think for me, I'm like, oh, okay. And I think it was one of those things where it's like, you're in a conversation with someone and something happens and it just kind of goes over you. And I think I just got glossed over, and then you think about it later and you're like, wait a minute, why would we skip over this so you can do that? So I think when she was actually talking to me about it and she said it, I think I was just in a state of like, I don't know what I was thinking at the time.
Thanks.
Good.
Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you, Derek.